Spirits podcast, a boozy dive into mythology, legends, and folklore. Every week, we pour a drink and learn about a new story from around the world. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Julia.
And we are so pleased to be here with multi-hyphenate, writer, actor, comedian, early web pioneer, I would say. Something of hers is in the Smithsonian. That is true. It's Felicia Day. Welcome, Felicia.
Hello. I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I love cold calling people and getting on their podcast.
It is actually our absolute pleasure. When Amanda was like, "You'll never guess who emailed us," I was like, oh my God. Incredible.
I was like, is this a phishing attempt?
I know. I think a lot of people thought because I get emails all the time. I don't even have a podcast that I update at all. And I get emails all the time like, this famous person would love to be on your podcast. I'm like, oh, this is a fake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
But, I love my graphic novel so much that I just was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this work myself. And I'm going to track down all the coolest podcasts who might have me on. And you guys responded. And I want to thank you so much.
Again, our pleasure. I'm just going to keep saying that over and over again. Totally seem really cool. Don't even worry about it. But that brings up a great point because we are here to talk to you today about your graphic novel debut, The Lost Daughter of Sparta. Now, a little sort of peek behind the curtain for you, Felicia. The week before this episode is coming out, we just released a primer ahead of the Odyssey movie that is coming out. So people can go into that movie sort of knowing what the plot and the characters are. And then when we had you pitch this as a episode idea, I'm like, well, they have to go back to back. It's going to be so perfect.
Oh my gosh, I would love to float on the coattails of the Odyssey. And what a great time for you guys to be talking about what you do. I've been a mythology nerd my whole life. My daughter, obsessed with mythology, went to Greece as an excuse to research this graphic novel, but I really just wanted to go to Greece.
Hell yeah.
I'm so excited and hoping that so many people who might not be as familiar with the characters get as geeked out as I did when I started diving into this a lot more seriously.
Incredible. Well, I guess to start, can you tell us a little bit about the story of The Lost Daughter of Sparta?
Yeah, so this graphic novel is centered around a girl named Philonoe, and this is a real mythological character that I found in Hesiod. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I apologize if you are a Greek scholar and are wincing right now.
Folks just sat through an hour and 45 minutes of me being like, wait, who's Matt Damon? So you'll be fine.
Yeah, so I was reading ancient Greek mythology and writing because I had insomnia after I had a child. She was the worst sleeper. Therefore, I only had one child. And I couldn't sleep after a while. She broke my brain so that even when she was sleeping, I couldn't sleep. And so I later got some help, psychiatric meds, therapy, all sorts of no coffee, all this. But it was a real struggle for a year and a half, 2 years. And the only thing that would calm me down enough to actually sleep eventually was to read interesting but not stimulating things, which happened to be mythology. So I would deep dive and I would click on my Kindle when I read on that, and I'd go to Wikipedia and read about all these secondary characters or things they mentioned, and I just really nerded out. And I found mention of Philonoe, this daughter of Tyndareus and Leda, one of the sisters of Helen of Troy, who we all know. And it mentioned that Philonoe was made immortal by Artemis.
It's literally the only thing you can find about her online. It's wild.
Yeah. There are several references to this character, so it wasn't made up only in this fragment. Mm-hmm. But that is it. We know nothing else about it. And I was like, whoa, this is fascinating. She's a part of this family that has this incredible sense of mythology and, all these stories about this whole family. And I just started kind of building a story around it. And that's how I found her, and that's how I wrote a story. And so this is all I know is that she was made immortal by Artemis, and I came up with a whole story around that myself.
I am really excited to sort of dig into that further and talk about sort of the surrounding mythology and then how you did a fantastic job both adapting that and also giving new lens to a lot of characters that if people have listened to the 497 episodes thus far of Spirits, will sound very familiar. But I think before we dive into that, I want to talk a little bit about your background in mythology and stuff like that. I know you were a fan of mythology as a kid, but then came to revisit it as an adult, trying to break your insomnia. What was your first exposure to Greek mythology as a whole?
I think It's very similar to a lot of other people. I got the Delaire's Greek mythology book, the one.
I'm always fascinated by who was a Delaire's kid and who was an Edith Hamilton kid, because I was an Edith Hamilton kid growing up.
You were just advanced, Julia.
You know what?
That's a thick tome, lady.
It is indeed.
The thicker the better, in books and in women.
Exactly. No, I got my book very early, and I remember being, I just picture the page with Demeter reaching for Persephone. That's one of the most indelible pictures from a book from my childhood. I remember being very traumatized with it, but I was a very traumatized child. I don't remember good things from my childhood. All the trauma I got real stored in here. So,
there's a real correlation between like creative expression, comedy, artistic output, and childhood trauma. So I just remembered these pictures. They were so vivid, and that just hooked me. But I didn't really ever explore it further. I did a lot of folklore reading. I love fairy tales. I love all that. And then I kind of fell out of it until my daughter was born. And when she was like 2 or 3, I was like determined she wasn't going to be a Disney kid. I just hate Disney. Not hate it. I just didn't want her to absorb those princesses too early, because I feel like they're super, super destructive. And that's one of the reasons why I feel Inoe's journey is like it is. It's kind of like, hey, girls, there's a lot of things she goes through. It's my wisdom about like women and how you're going to try to be pigeonholed and how you need to live your own life outside of these constructs that we are shoved in very, very early. And so we started reading Osborne's and Del Rey's, and, she listened to Greeking Out. And so we really got into it together. And that's where I got the inspiration, just be like, well, you never really have read the Odyssey outside of college. Why don't you go and do that again? And that just started everything.
Yeah. And I mean, there are such fantastic translations of the Odyssey now. Like, shout out to the ones that are from like the 1800s and 1900s. But the adaptations, for example, we talked a lot about the Emily Wilson translation in our Odyssey episode. And my God, it's like so accessible to a lot of people now, but also captures that sort of like poetic beauty that was translators astound me.
Yeah.
I simply don't know how they do it. It is an art form in and of itself, but it is really easy for someone to pick up the Odyssey now and read it and understand what's going on.
Absolutely. And it's such a gift, too, because this is a story. And these characters, I mean, everything we write about them is fan fiction in a way, right?
Yes.
I mean, there are some people who really do believe that Aphrodite exists. But for the most part, they're just a shared fabric that we all have. And even, the plays that we know from the ancient Roman time, those were fanfic about things that were written thousands of years, 1,000 years before them or 500 years. So this is all just this generational storytelling that we have that we get to give each other. And there are inherent lessons in there. And they're also just like, well, that was the Justice League of the time.
Truly. It's like every movie that's made about Jesus or like any biblical like TV series or anything like that. You're like, that is an interpretation of a text that already exists. And you are putting your own spin on these quote unquote characters. Whether they're historic or not is up for debate a lot of the time, but it is like a very fascinating way to tell stories through a modern lens. And I think that is exactly what The Lost Daughter of Sparta is about.
Well, thank you so much. I've read I don't know if you've ever read the Isaac Asimov annotated Bible, but that's one of the most interesting books I've ever read, because you never think of these stories that are kind of presented to us. This is it. This is history. And then learning that there is history there, but there's a lot more nuance, and you can learn a lot more about the society that lived these stories in a way that I think is really fascinating.
I'm curious, what about this fragment about this character stood out to you? I'll tell you, when I was like reading the sort of log line of the book, I was at first thinking like, wow, I typically see goddesses banning people to eternal life as like a tree or a flower or a cow. You don't often get immortality as a sort of gift from the gods. What piqued your interest about that? And what do you think makes Inoue so special?
I just smelled that there was a story under there. And I love Artemis. And in fact, I've always felt a little sorry for Artemis. She specifically has been removed from having love because of trying to be herself. And I think that really resonated with me. One of the other reasons is that I was, again, reading fairy tales and to my daughter, and fairy tales indoctrinate little girls into thinking they're objects and thinking that they do not have body autonomy because they're given to people as prizes, right? And this is the origin of, I think, a lot of a problem with, women in general and girls in general, right? That's where they know that their outsides are them and their value is what other people see in them. And so it really made me angry that I was teaching my daughter these things that are unconsciously adopted in my own mind, even when I fight them and I'm aware of them. And how many of us are not aware of, the way that this is where we're sort of brainwashed into thinking of ourselves and a gender as one thing. And again, I don't think it really serves who we are as people. So that's kind of what I wanted to deconstruct. It was anger. It was also me imagining that, I was always seeking somebody to approve of me and all of this. And that's the one thing that I've learned in my 40-something years of being alive is that the greatest strength you can have is to know yourself and assert who you are and follow your own dreams outside of what other people want from you. So, I had a lot of complicated issues I was working through. It was also the beginning of COVID, and I had been cut off from Hollywood. And as an actor and a writer and a producer, it's a terrible place to be because in a lot of ways, the work is always great, but getting the work is really very dehumanizing. And then you start to think, well, what can I make myself into that these people will approve of, right? And so we get to that same sort of toxic, female gaze that we have on ourselves. Like, what can I make myself into? How can I make my face prettier? How can I dress better? And it all is just like, we are essentially our bodies. And I wanted to kind of fight that in any way I could.
So I think this is actually a great transition to talk a little bit about the plot and sort of the story of Philinoy as a character and how you expanded out on her. For a little bit of context for the folks at home, Leda is a really interesting character in Greek mythology, mostly because she bears a lot of very famous children who go on to live interesting but then tragic lives, I would say. Castor and Pollux, for example, are twins. One is born to be like invulnerable and immortal, and the other is not, and both kind of meet a sort of tragic end. There's also, of course, Helen of Troy, as we have talked about quite a bit in our previous episode. There's Clytemnestra, who we also spoke about in our previous episode. And then there is Trimonda, who is someone who often, not as much as Philinoy, but perhaps is often shunted to the side because she does not play as big a role in the Iliad and the Odyssey, but is also someone who sort of is tragic in love. And that is sort of the premise of the Lost Daughter of Sparta, is that all of these children have been cursed by the goddess Aphrodite because, oh God, what is the king's name?
Tyndareus. It's the curse of the family of Tyndareus, essentially. And that's also, I think, just adding those two things up, that Helen of Troy was not responsible for the whole war because she betrayed her husband. That plus the fragment was why I wrote this book, because I was like, these women have been done wrong.
Yes. 100%. And like we talked about in our Odyssey episode, Helen is such a like sort of tragic figure. When you see her in the Odyssey after she has been brought back from Troy to Sparta, she is taking this enchanted like wine drug that makes it impossible for her to feel grief. And you're like, oh, girlfriend, what did you go through that these essentially men haven't talked about in thousands of years? She is such a tragic character. Clytemnestra is also a tragic character because she essentially wants revenge against Agamemnon, not only because she took another lover while he was away at the Trojan War, but because Agamemnon sacrificed their own daughter to the goddess Artemis in order to get the winds to blow.
Hey, not cool.
He also, and I didn't know this until I started really deep diving, he also killed her first husband and assaulted her. It was not like a voluntary, like, hey, cheat with me. No, he took her by force. And so we have at least minimum two characters who are women who are literally just they're either kidnapped or assaulted many, many times. And so they have no control over their lives. And they exist in value only because of their connections and their outsides. And it's just so infuriating. And if you read all the Greek myths, like honestly, like Medea, Ariadne, like these women.
Medusa.
Oh, yes. They're key in a lot of people's fates. And I mean, just like, every woman who's like doing the dishes while the guys are in front of the TV, like they're doing the work that needs to be done to get the task done. And yet they get dumped along the way. They get thrown away. They don't get, it just infuriates me. And it's just like, and in diving into the historical Greek perspective on women, I realized, oh, this is institutional. This is a societal thing. But like we have people nowadays who are trying to, that's their goal to take, that is the template with which they would love society to be built upon. So this is current right now, right? And so however we can just subtly or overtly dismantle that, I don't know, that's just my mission in life.
And you kind of see that as well with their obsession with not only with the religious violence of their obsession with the Crusades, but also going back further and the whole like concept of like the Roman Empire and this idea of like they're obsessing over cultures where women were seen as objects of value to be taken and traded and stolen rather than like actual human beings with their own minds and thoughts. And like, I love Greek mythology. I love it with my whole heart. Even the women are bad about that. There's no real girls in Greek mythology.
Well, I don't know, man. I don't know what you get targeted on social media for and what you see women doing to their faces and their whole routines of trying to maintain this appearance, which is in their minds, it seems, their only value. Like this is, and it's not men telling women to do this. This is a women perpetuated world where it's like, oh, the glassier the skin, the more valuable you are. Like the bigger your lips, the more sexy you are. Like, it's just the whole idea that we are our outsides. We have to cling to our youth because our value is in our youth, because through the eyes of a man, whether it's biological or societal, this is where women should be and maintain themselves. And therefore, you're just clinging to something that never grows in value. You're just trying to maintain it. And it's men and women. It's society, right? But society is all arbitrary. And that's kind of why I love fantasy and science fiction. You could invent any society and make it true. But we don't really understand that. We just adopt what we adopt, its existence, and we just follow the rules.
It's very fascinating, too, to have this conversation and know that when we hang up on this call, we're going to go and talk about Love Island for an hour after this and sort of like the societal expectations of what we force like young women to look like and talk like in order to, stay in a couple, be with a man, et cetera, is just like, I'm like a little shell shocked thinking about the comparisons.
And like my personal, lens on all of this stuff, it's like reverse biographical criticism where I can't decouple capitalism from any of this. And the fact that we are striving to succeed in a system that nobody consented to and yet live within and have to attempt to prosper within. You can't prosper within a system by breaking its rules. That's, that requires a whole other level of like disruption and being okay with being seen as at best unsuccessful and at worst like an enemy of this kind of like great nationalistic project. And the thing, Felicia, that like you're really helping unlock for me is like there's it's not an accident that the women in Greek mythology are ciphers, objects, scraps, there's shadows of their impressions left on the record because we don't want to know about them. We want them to be a fantasy and to be an object. And just in the way that like we are sold, the certain like handbag or collagen treatment or, car that is meant to not just be an object, but make us feel and make our life just be better. Whether we're talking about a woman so beautiful that wars were fought over her, or just an object, created through human suffering that's meant to alleviate your own existential suffering. You can't know about the object. That takes the fantasy out of it. And so I think it's just an inherently feminist act and disruptive act to say, no, let's zoom in. What is she thinking? Why is Helen drinking that wine that takes the grief away? What has gone on in her experience? Why? And how does it feel to be left behind?
Yeah, I mean, Helen in particular, when I learned when I was deep diving, Theseus, what a disgusting dude. He kidnapped her at 12 years old and left her with his mom until she was, quote unquote, ready to be married. He kidnapped this girl. And it's a wild idea that this was the hero of Athens, but they invented to try to make themselves look cool, this is what their standard was. This is what their thought process was. And, you dive deep. And if you want to see incel culture at its finest, it's in the Greek writing. You can find some jaw-dropping things.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Aristotle even was like, women are just deformed men, like every single thinker, quote unquote, in ancient Greece has some real great stuff to say about women. Not, it's kind of infuriating. But the only thing you could do, you're right. Like, we are caught in a whirlwind of exploitation of ourselves, of society, of capitalism, it is this weird place we're in where it all is driven by money, and the money reinforces the patriarchy and all these things. And the only thing we could do is just step out. Like, my whole career has just been about trying to subvert what I see as unfair and try to burn a little bit of the side of an institution off. Yes, we all can fantasize about taking things completely down. As we could see with modern politics, just the presence of a Black president literally created the environment we're in now, right? So exceptionalism just leads to a backlash eventually. But you can only hope that the oscillation is such that we are moving forward an inch over time with the oscillation. And, that's what I just try to do with my work. If me showing up as a female gamer shows somebody, hey, women game, maybe I could game. That one person is worth it, right?
Yeah. I mean, any sort of change that you can make in the world, I think, is the important part of doing what you do. And I think that is also why it's really important that while we can look at Greek mythology or just look at Greek writings that we still have that are surviving to this day and say, wow, we really treated women poorly. And then also say, but we can reclaim this in a way that, one, we can be critical of the original text, but two, now tell our own stories through our own lenses, I think is incredibly important. And part of the reason why we do this podcast, honestly, because it is important for us to be able to look at these stories through a queer feminist lens and say what this was originally intended for does not have to be the story that we tell now.
And again, you reach people with your podcast over the 500 episodes? That's crazy.
Almost 500.
You don't know who those people will affect with their own. It really is a butterfly effect. And that's how I think change happens and how we shift a little bit. And it's so funny that you said that because, I've played a lot of queer characters in my career as an actor. It's very interesting to see how women fight to be themselves when they're a little bit different, and how, especially, I kind of wrote this for the 15, 16-year-old girl who comes up to me and is inspired by my supernatural character to come out to their family, and seeing their vulnerability. On the outside, they're so determined to be themselves. And on the inside, it's not congealed because, again, they've been told that that's not right for them to actually follow who they are by just everything that we consume, right? And so just strengthening that, especially in a vulnerable time in your life, is just so important and so incredibly rewarding.
Well, let's strengthen our own constitutions for the rest of this conversation and pop into the kitchen for a quick refill.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, it's Amanda, and welcome to The Refill, where, folks, we interviewed motherfucking Felicia Day, okay? I'm saying that really quietly because we played it really cool in front of her. But oh my God, it was so cool. Damn. Oh, okay. Whew, thank you. I had to get that out. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Thank you for listening to the mid-roll. If you like this show and want us to keep making it, please pledge your support at patreon.com/spiritspodcast, okay? We are going to be making some exciting new changes to the Patreon soon, but if you want to get in under the wire at the annual rate or the monthly rate that we have had unchanged for about 8 years, now is the time to do it, okay? That's patreon.com/spiritspodcast. Thank you to our new patrons who have joined us in the last couple of weeks, Hannah, Kira, Mia, and Kelly. And our supporting producer level patrons. One of their benefits is that their names are read every single episode. We feel warm feelings to them. If we meet them in person, we explode up and get very excited, like I did once to poor Chibi Yokai. But supporting producer patrons, Alicia, Hannah, Scott, Anne, Matthew, Lily, and Will, and our legend level patrons, Captain Jonathan, Malachi, Cosmos, Chibi Yokai themselves, Audra, Sarah, Beam Me Up, Scotty, Morgan, Rico Like, and Smoliv. You can join us, and I wish you would, at patreon.com/spiritspodcast for things like bonus urban legends, recipe cards for every damn episode, director's commentary, and more. Lots going on over here at Multitude, the podcast collective of which we are a founding member. And we would love to tell you about our friends at Simple and Clean. This is a podcast all about Kingdom Hearts, which is a video game following the story of a lost boy trying desperately to find his two best friends with the help somehow of Disney's own Donald Duck and Goofy, all while defeating strange monster guys called the Heartless all across a series of Disney movies. Now, whether you think that sounds cool or you think, what the hell, Amanda? Either way, you should check out Simple and Clean. It's a show all about video games, Disney films, and the weird place that fandom occupies in between, hosted by our pals and yours, Mayana and Misha. Go on over, listen to Simple and Clean. New episodes are every Sunday, so search Simple and Clean in your podcast player now.
We are back. And Felicia, one of the things that I love to ask our guests is, what have you been drinking lately? Whether that is cocktails, mocktails, coffee creations, what has been your drink of choice?
I'm a weirdo, as you probably know from everything I've done in my life. I don't like cold drinks. I don't know if it's my teeth or whatever. So I usually only drink water.
Okay.
And then in the morning, it's really bad for my, I have really bad acid reflux and I really should not have it, but I'm writing a script right now. I need my morning warmth. So I make a almond milk honey Earl Grey tea. So it's like a London fog.
Ooh, very nice.
I just love it so much. Although I did go to London recently. I was working there and I asked for a London fog and they looked like I had just spit on their shoe. They had no idea what it was. They were angry that something would be called this because it's a Pacific Northwest thing.
I don't know, man. It's been popularized across the US, at least by Starbucks. So that is a thing I have heard of.
Yes. And it's good to have a drink. You know, coffee, I love coffee, but again, it's just too hard on my stomach. I love coffee so much, but the good thing is about it is that a London fog at Starbucks, anywhere in the world, is like, okay, at least I can get my drink. I want to use the local places, but I'm like, do you know how to make a London fog? You know who does? Starbucks.
And I know it will be the same no matter where I go.
Exactly.
So
it's a tea bag.
So we've been having a great conversation about like the roles that women are expected to fill. And one of the things that I loved that the graphic novel did was you sort of were able to tell the audience about these different roles through the various characters that Filinoy meets on her quest given to her by Aphrodite to lift the curse on her family. And the one that I felt like made me pretty emotional. I mean, they all made me pretty emotional. But the one in particular that made me emotional was the scene with Echidna, who, if you are listening to the podcast, you probably know is the mother of monsters. If there is a monster that you come across in Greek mythology, they are probably the child of Echidna, and they're constantly being murdered by quote unquote heroes in Greek mythology. The one surviving one, thank God, is Cerberus, our good boy. We love him very much on this podcast. But in terms of writing that perspective as a mother, did you feel like you put a lot of yourself into writing that scene with Echidna?
That scene with Echidna has a lot of layers to it. It's really about perfectionism. It's about pleasing other people. It's also about being defined as a label and not a person. You're a wife, you're a daughter. You have all these things that those labels kind of trap you into, just like men do, you know, husband, son, you know, these are all things that we sort of, oh, well, as that role, I need to do this. As this role, I need to do that. And I kind of wanted to just be like, well, you are a person first and foremost. But also when I was just trying to find some antagonists for Filinoy on her journey as she goes out for Aphrodite and collects objects, as everyone does in a quest, I just wrote down all my favorite monsters. And then I realized I didn't even, add it up until I was like, wait, this one woman is the mother of all these creatures who were killed. And yeah, as a mother, I'm just like, wow, this is the worst thing I can imagine in my life because she's a sentient being. All these were to some degree sentient. I mean, all animals are sentient, but conscious and, human, kind of humanesque and personified. So I was like, this must be a horrible, horrible journey. And like all three of the monsters that she encounters are my favorite, and they all have different lessons. And this one particularly was, as a mother, you will sacrifice and sacrifice and sacrifice. And especially since, as we see in folklore and history and fairy tales, your function as a woman, once you're given as a gift, it's to give an heir. Again, you go from one label to another, daughter, mother.
From being a commodity to producing one, capitalism's favorite thing.
Exactly. So to sort of point out that this is not all you are. This is something you will go through on a journey and adopt, but you are not that. And I think her character particularly is like, I didn't realize that until now. Hopefully you realize it. So again, we have a societal prejudice of older women and younger women, right? Mm-hmm. There's always stepmothers. There's always evil older women trying to take away the autonomy or the opportunities of younger women. And these are
literally the youth, right? Like the thing that makes them most valuable in this fucked up kind of hierarchy.
Yeah. And so we are taught, again, girls are taught that older women are their enemies, right? Like just by society, right? And yes, there's a biological thing that girls go through. My daughter, who's 9, is now rolling her eyes. It makes them a dork.
You're like, I was the dork. Excuse me.
Exactly. Exactly. So, but that like need for children to get away from their parents is honed in on to be taken advantage by the patriarchy, because younger women, if they don't listen to older women, they're not going to be as pliable to the needs of men. All right. Like that's just an inherent thing. And so that just kind of, again, enrages me, because I would love to impart wisdom to other girls and have them not go down the roads that I did. But, for me to just tell them, I'm lecturing them, and I'm kind of an inherent enemy, right? I'm the thing they don't want to be, old and unuseful to other men. So then they don't want anything to do with it. So if I could tell it through a story, then maybe I get through a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, like the fact that Greek mythology literally tends to break down the archetype of women as the maiden, the mother, and the crone is like, it's literally there. It's literally right there. And we're all looking at it, right?
Yeah.
To Amanda's point earlier, and to the book's point as well, you make a point of mentioning how Zeus allows Echidna to not be imprisoned alongside with Typhus, and specifically in order to raise her children, until she realizes that the only reason Zeus has allowed her to raise these children in the first place is to like have this roster of monsters for heroes to go out and destroy and kill. And it's like, God, this idea that society wants you to create children in order to like essentially keep putting labor into the capitalist machine. Jeez, it's like,
oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Brutal. It's absolutely brutal.
But isn't that it? That's it. You just added it up.
It's why our society fetishizes, pregnancy and birth without supporting mothers and children. Like it's about expanding the like working capacity and productivity for enriching people who are already rich, not actually about supporting, your desire or not to be a parent and have a family.
That summary, that touches me in a way that I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that's what I was doing. But it's so insightful. You're absolutely right. And, Zeus does not come across as a good guy here,
Nor should he.
Yeah, he shouldn't. That's why I wanted to analyze who Artemis is and what kind of experience she did. And, there's one particularly personal story for me in there about her and Orion. And that's because, I have a very weird upbringing. And I see men as equals, and I see myself as an equal to them. And I don't really adopt some of the things. It might be a neurodivergent thing or what it is. But the idea that I could just be a friend to a dude, and then they only saw me as one thing, a sexually available object, and then I don't exist after that. I mean, every woman goes through it, right? Mm-hmm. And so then we have to approach every man as, well, how are they sexually thinking about me? How do I navigate this in a professional setting? How do I navigate this in a personal setting? And we're always just kind of moving the weights on the scale to try to have whatever dynamic it is for them, to make them comfortable, to make the relationship functional, because the minute we're not useful, then we get thrown away, right?
Yeah.
And that's very much like, I see that in Hollywood quite a bit, right? Women, you see all these groups of comedians and they do movies over and over again with their dude friends, and the woman who plays the wife or daughter, they're always different. Mm-hmm. The women are just interchangeable. And you see it in professional settings, right? The dudes go out for drinks afterwards, and then they give each other promotions and they hook each other up because they're buddies. They play basketball on the weekends. Like, they're dudes. Women are not in that. It makes me mad. Like, but again, how do you fight everything? I don't know. I'm just going to tell a story and try to just change a couple people's minds. And what's beautiful is, I will tell you, the best thing I encountered on tour was a dude came up with his son, who was about 18, and he was like, hey, just very blue collar dude. He's like, hey, I work in a steel factory. Your book made me think a lot. And I just want you to know that when I see a woman in my factory, doesn't matter about her gender, I treat her like an equal. And that's really important to me. And I was like, I almost cried.
Yeah.
Because I was like, this guy sees it. He sees it. And he sees the way probably his contemporaries, colleagues treat women. And he just doesn't do it. That's where the real change will come. Allyship, women and men, like just being on the same page, like we're just all here. And that's why I love being a geek. You sit down at a gaming table, ideally you're just gaming together. It doesn't matter what you look like.
I 100%. And I hope that also not only did he see that, he's also imparting that sentiment onto his son as well, giving that to the next generation and being like, this is how you treat everyone, does not matter what gender they are.
Yeah.
I love it.
I also really love, I don't want to spoil the ending of the story itself, but I really love sort of not quite fairy tale twist, but the sort of, I think, beautiful twist of this idea of Aphrodite's curse maybe was not exactly what it was expected to be at the end of the tale. And I know, sort of based on what we've been talking about here and your author's note at the end of the book, that you see a lot of yourself in Philinoy, and being able to sort of have people see you for who you are, I think is a really beautiful through line of this story. One, I just really appreciate that. And two, I know you just said I feel like I sort of worked all of this stuff out after I wrote the book. But did you have that sort of through line in mind when you were approaching Philinoy's story?
I actually didn't come up with that twist until I was kind of in the outline. I was like, oh, this brings it all together. It's just, I stumbled on it. I wish I could say that I was like, oh yeah, that's going to be it. No, I did the research like a total nerd. I put it all on. I did my little murder board of things that were connected. And then I just started writing a fun outline, right? And that process for me as a writer has been so difficult to find a way that I work freely versus very constipated. And it's the first time that I really wrote something following my instincts and what my inner voice. And that's because it was COVID. And I knew that nobody in Hollywood would ever probably option this. It wasn't trying to be tailored to sell to an executive. I was just telling a story that was true to myself. And obviously that is a big theme of the book as well. The greatest joy you can find is being true to yourself and not trying to tell yourself to other people. So it's a multidimensional thing that's very personal on a lot of levels. And, Aphrodite as a character is really, she's kind of an insecure bitch a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the end of the day, this is a love story. And so when it's revealed, she has a lot more cleverness in her than I think that anybody would give her credit for. Because, again, she's her body almost all the time, but we all have more underneath. And to have her kind of be this sort of mechanizer and somebody who was actually one step ahead, it delights me because, again, it's just she's an ally and she created something in someone who was afraid to be themselves and allowed them to live a fuller life. And that's really the gift that we can give anybody.
Yeah.
I always get so annoyed when people portray Aphrodite as being really vapid and sort of brainless, because I think she is perhaps one of the more clever of the goddesses that we see in Greek mythology. But because she has been sort of shunted into this role of love goddess, we don't get to often see that. And one of the details that I really loved that you included was a lot of the different gods and goddesses, depending on the city state they were being worshipped in, would have these different epithets and different versions of themselves that were worshipped. And the fact that you included the sort of chained, almost warrior version of Aphrodite as the Spartan worship sent chills down my spine. I was like, oh, Felicia! Ah!
Oh my God. That's so great. I just stumbled upon that as a historical fact in ancient Sparta. And, just like the Odyssey, the ancient Mycenae people, where they actually would, this is how medieval people lived, right? We have this sort of idea, but it's not really true. in my exploration, I was like, well, that's kind of what Homer was writing of a distant past in a sort of idealized way that had some historical context, but like we're all just kind of talking about stuff that we actually don't know about. Whether that version of Aphrodite, whether they even worshipped Aphrodite in the time that Helen would have been alive in the historical record, we don't know. Nobody really knows a lot. But when I stumbled across that Spartan temple, Aphrodite had two versions of herself and one was in chains, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I just cherry picked things that I was like, oh, what? And put them in there. And then I put them in a gumbo. But I'm so glad that you pointed that out because I don't think most people would know that that's a real thing that happened. She was in chains, this particular character, because of that curse.
Yeah, I believe it's Aphrodite Auraria was oh God, it's so cool. The details of the different ways that the various Greeks, depending on what they needed at the time, like politically, but also culturally from these different gods, is like a fascinating little tidbit that I feel like you have to deep dive just like a layer or two deeper to get to. And it's so worth checking out.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't even scrape the surface of it, quite frankly. I feel like, especially for Artemis, like she had so many different guises as the maiden, but also childbirth. And, it is really fascinating. And like, we can't really know exactly how they approach the gods like that. Other than that, what do we need from them? You're right. Like, what do we need from them? Let's make them into that.
Yeah. And I think that is also a really interesting fact about mythology worldwide, not just the Greeks itself, but this idea that the way that we portray gods and goddesses over time really does change. So when we're doing our like sort of interpretations of who these gods are now through fiction but also like pagan worship and stuff like that, there is no one way of doing it. Like even the ancient Greeks were deciding, oh, we want this version, not this version, depending on what they needed. And so, hey, whatever way you kind of tell these stories, and I said this about the Odyssey as well, it's all up for our interpretation now. We have these texts and then we can interpret those texts how we want to interpret them. We can give the context of what it was historically, but also at the same time, we can approach those stories how we want to now as well.
I mean, like, it's so beautiful that we have so many women in particular exploring these characters, and with Cersei just kind of opening the floodgates. I mean, that was kind of my inspiration too, because, these beautiful stories, and I just didn't see a graphic novel in the world. I was like, why not? This is what I want to see brought to life. So it's, more universal, but we're just lucky. We're lucky to be alive right now with this output of beautiful reinterpretation.
And I would love to talk about the graphic novel of it all. What was it like to find and collaborate with Rowan McCool?
Yeah, she stood out to me in a spreadsheet of women who use the hashtag Visible Women on Twitter when Twitter was a thing.
Sorry, binders full of women, hashtag 2026 edition.
An Excel sheet of women that Kelly Sue DeConnick, the very famous comic book writer, she had this hashtag where she would encourage people to use this hashtag to get more visible. And so I asked her for it and I looked down and I just, I picked Rowan because her art is fantastical and yet a little bit eerie. And she doesn't draw women as sort of this sort of cliched YA graphic novel face, very round, cherubic, very pretty. I wanted something a little more edgy, something that wouldn't just peg it as a YA book, but also just allow women to be a little different. And I just love, oh my God, her Artemis. The first time you see Artemis, it's just like the best panel ever. And Philinoe is not traditionally beautiful. And I don't know, would I have sold more books if I had used that graphic novel style? I don't know, you guys. All I know is that it's not.
But it's not important. It's important that the story itself is beautiful. The art portrays that so very well. It's about like, hey, this is an incredible story.
Yeah, no. And the fact that we chose to do the three colors, which
I was going to bring that up.
Oh my gosh, the three colors. So we did black, white, and red because Philinoe is cursed, quote unquote, with a port wine stain on her face. And I've had a couple friends in my life who've had this, and it's something very hard to deal with. It's a very apparent thing that makes you different. That's inherent to the story and her journey. And to bring that to life with only that one color, we debated, should we bring color in later? Should we use yellow? Should we, and just having the three colors to kind of evoke the idea of the ancient Greek pots, which are red, black, and white. that was kind of something we stumbled into. And Rowan's use of the red is so beautiful and very intentional in a way that I could never have attracted her. I was just like, okay, I want it to get more colorful as we go on, but there are key moments. And she's like, I got it. So psychologically, all the credit goes to her about where to use the red to draw your attention. And I just love what she did.
Particularly in the epilogue, that use of red at the very end. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So beautiful.
It is. It makes me tear up. It makes me tear up.
I'm no fine art critic, but something about like being given a limited palette and doing the goddamn most with the palette you are given really stands out to me and speaks to my own complex relationship with the gender I was assigned.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is nice sometimes to work within limitation. Like it's easier almost. You're like, okay, here are my limits. What can I do to get around the rules? Or how do I optimize my experience within this as an artist? It was just very rewarding to see it come to life when it was just kind of an idea. What if we did this? Oh, it worked? What? I was actually almost surprised.
How did that experience compare to script writing? Because you are a very experienced writer and producer. To my mind, as someone who works in neither medium, both of them sort of like are they seem like a skeleton that then the meat gets added. Do you know what I mean? How did that feel in comparison?
It was a long process, and there were some extenuating circumstances, such as COVID, that allowed this to be a 6-year process from beginning to end. And, that's not normal, but it takes what it takes. And it was interesting because it took so long that I kept coming back to the story and sort of adding layers that I probably wouldn't have been able to had I had a 2-year process of development. And then Rowan, every single time that she was, I was very specific in the script about paneling, like what angle, who would be in a thing. But I was always like, if you see it differently, please let me know. I sent her reference photos from going to Greece. And, I had a great time being able to do that. Definitely would love to deduct any trip traveling to write my next thing. Exactly. And so it was a very back and forth process. We had the editor and the publisher and the team at Simon & Schuster really went the distance to make this such a beautiful library edition of this book. But, honestly, the lesson that I learned was less is more. I think probably the script that I started out with was 20% leaner by the time it was finished, because every time I get a panel back, I cut some dialogue or cut some words because I'm like, well, the picture's doing the work. I know that I just read somewhere that several famous directors like Chris Nolan, I think, and George Miller, like, they just cut dialogue. They'll go into the script and they'll be like, no, we don't need it. No, we don't need it. No, we didn't. And it definitely, I'm a very verbose lady. I talk a lot, as you've probably learned.
You're in great company.
Exactly. But, the fact that it's a visual medium means the visuals are the king or queen, like the ruler of it. And so the fact that every time I got one, I was like, well, I don't need her to say that because we're seeing it. I had to get over the fact that I love my words to just get out of the way for the picture.
Yeah.
I will say the use of the angles, particularly during the Gorgon scenes, I thought was masterfully done. Like the fact that you're like seeing the reflections of the Gorgons in like the pot of soup that they're cooking and stuff like that. Oh, so beautiful.
I said, that's a filmmaker. It was so cinematic in the very best way.
Thank you. That was the crone power section. And I was like, you know what? Crones are great.
Yeah. You're like, we don't need society. We can just go do our own thing. And I love that for them.
If I'm lucky, I get to be a crone. You know what I mean? If I'm lucky, life is long. If I'm lucky, I have decades more of thinking and wisdom and sloughing off society's shit. And if I get to be the crone one day watching kids go by from my porch, like,
it is a beautiful blessing to age.
I will be that lady with the weird caftan on, the messy yard with too many herbs and like too many animals, probably. I'll do it.
Not a bra to be found. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I am ready for my patterned muumuu. That's what I'm always saying.
Yes.
Statement glasses, patterned muumuu, haven't worn a bra in decades, lots of herbs around. This is all I want.
I'm halfway there at that point.
You truly.
Felicia, we've had such an amazing conversation. But is there anything that we didn't get a chance to ask you about that you wanted to speak on in terms of the project or Greek mythology or anything like that?
Oh my gosh, you guys are so you opened up my floodgates of verbal diarrhea to the point where I just am grateful for having people who really clicked with the book in a way that I appreciate. It means a lot to me. This is very personal. It's definitely a project, a passion project. And to reach people like it seems like I have with you guys, it just says thank you very much. Thank you. It's a gift that will make me more confident and even like talking about my book even more. So thanks. As an author, I thank you.
It is a gift, one, to have you here on the show, two, the fact that this book is a gift, not only to our listeners who are hopefully going to go out and buy it, but also anyone who gets a chance to read it. So thank you.
Including the 6-month-old and 8-month-old baby girls of my close friends for whom I have bought copies and said, put this in storage for a bit, but they will be ready for it one day. So Rue and Lucy, thank you.
My 9-year-old read it and she was like, it's great, Mama. You should have a glossary in the back in case people don't know some of these characters. I was like, oh.
Fair.
You know what? Maybe for the paperback.
There you go. Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea.
Thinking about the reader. I love it. Well, Felicia Day, can you please let people know where they can follow you and your work online? There are, of course, links to everything Felicia's about to mention and the book at bookshop.org in the description of this podcast.
Yeah, you can find me anywhere at Felicia Day or Felicia.day on TikTok because who knows?
Someone stole it.
It's a dormant account, but nobody from TikTok will give it to me. So it's okay. Felicia.day there. It's fine. TikTok is kind of trash, but sometimes I enjoy it.
Well, thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. It went places that I was hoping it would go, but was still surprised by. And that's always the sign of a great conversation. So thank you once again.
Thanks a lot for answering my cold call, non-spammy email.
We did it.
Yay.
And remember, listeners, when you are tasked with finding 3 objects from Aphrodite to lift the curse on your family, stay creepy.
Stay cool.
Later, Saters.